Don't celebrate this so-called Middle East peace deal that Trump announced the other day yet. Medea Benjamin informs us. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Donald Trump came out and announced that the U.S. and the United Arab Emirates have come to a peace deal. He's, clearly trying to get the Nobel Prize that Jimmy Carter got around this. But it seems kind of skeezy. A little. There's some weird stuff going on here. And when it comes to issues around the Middle East, my go-to source is the author of Kingdom of the Unjust, behind the U.S.-Saudi connection, Medea Benjamin. She's also the co-founder of Code Pink and Global Exchange, codepink.org, globalexchange.org, and can be tweeted at Medea Benjamin. And Medea is, sure enough, on the line with us right now. Medea, welcome back to the program. Tell us what this so-called peace deal is.
Well, it's not going to bring peace to the Palestinians, that's for sure. It is a boost for Trump in that, and let's recognize that this peace deal was announced here in the United States in Washington, D.C., not in the Middle East. And it's a boost for Netanyahu and also for the head of the United Arab Emirates. It's a formal recognition that Israel and the Emirates have already had a relationship for quite a while, but it goes against the whole idea that the Arab states were not going to recognize Israel until Israel gave equality to the Palestinians. So the ones that are really the worst off in this are the Palestinians.
So I recall when this was, when Trump first announced this, and Jared Kushner is out now saying, Saudi Arabia is next. I remember when that first happened thinking, basically you've got two right-wing governments cooking up a deal. That doesn't seem so weird. But B, I read some news reports that the leader of the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, was Sheikh Mohammed. I don't recall his name, but basically that he or somebody.
Yes.
Thank you, Mohammed bin Zayed. Came out and said, no, this is not a formal peace deal. This is not normalized relations. This is simply, we're simply agreeing to talk, basically, which they've been doing all along. That really this was not. There was no there there. Was that an overstatement or a misstatement?
Well, there is a there in terms of trade agreements, and the Emirates want to buy more and more sophisticated weapons from the United States and from Israel. So this helps in that regard. They've been using those weapons in the war in Yemen, and they've been using those weapons in Libya as well to support the Haftar rebellion that is against the group that has been recognized by the United Nations. And they also keep a lid on their own people. It's interesting that they've made it basically illegal for their own people to come out against this agreement. And then we have to put it, Tom, of course, in the context of Iran, because it's hard to understand why they would want to work together if you don't understand the enemy of my enemy is my friend concept. And that is one of the driving forces of this agreement.
You and I had this conversation, it seems like it was a year ago, about how the Middle East is basically split into, setting aside Israel, the Arab Middle East, or the Muslim Middle East, to include Iran, is split into Sunni and Shiite factions. And if you don't get that, then, a lot of other things just don't make sense. And when you do get that, everything falls into place, whether it's Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan or whatever it may be. Can you recap that real quickly and tell us how that split in Islam, now played out politically across the region, is being played essentially by Netanyahu? It seems to me like he's aligning himself with the Sunnis is the bottom line here.
He's aligning himself with the Sunnis, and Iran is the Shia country. But I think it's dangerous to speak just in those terms, Tom, because there are a lot of nuances to all of that. You have Qatar, which is a Sunni Gulf state, which is now an enemy of the Sunni Saudis and of the Emirates as well. So there's a number of other things in play. You get Bahrain, which is a Sunni-controlled country that has majority Shia, and they are seen as the ones who are most likely to sign on with Israel next. I would put it more in terms of these Arab countries that are kingdoms, that are dictatorships, that want to keep their own people down. If you look at Bahrain, for example, they need U.S. weapons to repress their own people who have tried to rise up unsuccessfully. So, yes, there is the Sunni-Shia split involved, but there's also interests of right-wing repressive governments that want to keep a lid on power and are looking out for their own interests.
Back in the early years of the Obama administration, and I'm sure you know the year. I'm sorry, I don't off the top of my head, but we had the so-called Arab Spring, that started with this street vendor setting himself afire in Tunisia, and it spread across the region and toppled the government in Egypt, et cetera, et cetera. There was a lot of hope that was a democracy movement, small d democracy movement, and that democracy could be flowering in the Middle East. What has happened to that?
Yes, it goes back to 2011, and it was a very exciting time. Tunisia is probably the only successful example of having overthrown a dictatorship and having a democratic government in place now. But for the rest of the Arab world, they were either unsuccessful, crushed, like in the case of Bahrain, by Saudi tanks provided by the United States, or in the case of Egypt, where there was a coup that overthrew the democratically elected government of the Muslim Brotherhood that many Western countries did not want to deal with. And it shows the hypocrisy of wanting democracy only if the people you want are elected in that democracy. So it has led to a lot of bloodshed without a lot of positive results. But it does show that there is a movement of people power, like you saw in Lebanon even before this blast happened, that there are people all over the Middle East who are yearning for more representative governments, and their efforts will ebb and flow as time allows. And I think we will see, in the case of Lebanon, perhaps some real change coming now, because people are so angry with a government that continues to fail to provide for people's needs. But that is the same in so much of the Arab countries. So we haven't seen the end of democratic uprisings.
Yeah. We just have 25 seconds, Medea. To what extent is all this being fueled by oil wealth versus other considerations?
Well, oil wealth and then financial wealth. There's big banks in the Emirates, and I think the considerations also revolve around the issue of weapons.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a remarkable time, and I think that we take our eye off the Middle East at our own peril. Medea Benjamin, author of Kingdom of the Unjust, Behind the U.S.-Saudi Connection. If you haven't read this book, you need to get a copy of it now. CodePink.org, globalexchange.org. Medea, thanks so much for dropping by.